Welcome to today's class. Today we're looking at the literacy paper from the Department for Education and Skills. Teachers need to pass this test before they get qualified teacher status. So we're going to start with the first line, which is really the title. Children stick to plans they make at 11. Now, you might be tempted to put a full stop in there, but it's a title, so it's unnecessary. You don't really use full stops in titles. Usually, you see them capitalise the main words in titles, but they've chosen not to, perhaps because this is an independent thought. So we're going to go on to the next line. Do children in the UK change their plans about their future? Now, really, there's no punctuation in the first two sentences, so we have to find the end of the first thought and the start of the new thought. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that UK looks a bit odd. The U looks a little bit smaller than the K. Now, of course, we need capital letters for UK, and so both letters must be big because it's an abbreviation of United Kingdom, which is a name anyway. And the second thing you should notice is that this word, do, the fact that it's at the start of the sentence means we've got some kind of question. And so we really ought to have a question mark at the end of this question. So let's read it one more time to find the end of the question. Do children in the UK change their plans about their future? Now, I don't think according to new research is part of that question, so I'm going to put a question mark in right after future, right there. And if that's the end of the first sentence, we need to change the letter A from a little letter to a capital letter. So that's already 3 changes we've made, and we've only got 15 to find in total. So I'm going to put 3 up here as 3 lines, because that's 3 changes. Okay, so let's read the next sentence. According to new research, by the time they are 11 years old, most children have made up their minds about their future and don't change them. Now, do read the sentences aloud in your head, just because it will help you understand where the natural breaks lie. And there is a natural break here after according to new research. Now, that means we need a comma there, and the reason why the comma is so necessary is that according to new research might be read according to new research by the time they are 11 years old. Now, maybe we mean research by the time they are 11 years old. And, of course, we don't mean that, and that's why we pause there. Really, we're showing the listener the end of the incomplete thought, according to new research, and the start of the main clause, the start of the complete thought. By the time they are 11 years old, most children have made up their minds. So we definitely need a comma there. It's a comma for a fronted adverbial in technical terms, but really we've just got an incomplete thought and then a comma and then a complete thought. Okay, if we carry on, at the end of this sentence, the word don't looks a little bit odd. It looks like something's missing, and something certainly is missing. We're missing the apostrophe. Remember that we need apostrophes to show missing letters. So really, this apostrophe signifies the missing O in do not. But we shorten it and make it a little, we make it into the word don't, and when we do that, we need the apostrophe to show the missing O. Okay? Let's go on to the next sentence. An independent study carried out for the Social Research Council found that 80% of 11-year-olds who said they would continue in education after 16 did so. Okay, so the Social Research Council sounds like a name. And if it's a name, and it clearly is because we've got capital S, capital R, that's a clue really that we definitely need capital C, because this is the last word in the name, the Social Research Council. So we need a capital C there, and this will be the 5th change, because don't was the 4th, and this is the 5th change. So we've got 5 changes already. So an independent study carried out for the Social Research Council found that 80% of 11-year-olds, now that should look a little bit odd to you. Really, this needs to be 3 words, 11 hyphen year hyphen olds. Now, the reason we need hyphens is because this is a compound noun. An 11-year-old is a noun. It's a boy or a girl who is 11 years old. So we say an 11-year-old. And to make it clear that it's an 11-year-old and not 11 one-year-olds, because it could mean that, 11-year-olds, it could mean 11 one-year-olds, but to make it clear, we use hyphens between 11 and year and another hyphen between year and olds. Okay, so we need two punctuation marks there, and that's why I'm going to put 2 marks up here. We need 2 hyphens for the 11-year-olds. Okay, now the general rule for hyphens is that if you don't hear an S on year, you need hyphens. So if you say he is 11 years old, that's not hyphenated. But an 11-year-old or an 11-year-old pupil will definitely be hyphenated because there's no S on year. Okay, let's come on to the next paragraph now. Professor Paul Kroll, who carried out the study, said the results revealed that many children had taken important decisions by the time that they left primary school. Now, what you need to notice here is we've got something called a non-defining relative clause. And it's non-defining because it's not defining which Professor Paul Kroll. Really, Professor Paul Kroll is a unique noun. It's very clear who we mean. And so this relative clause is unnecessary information. It's not necessary to know which Paul Kroll. And because it's extra information, it needs to be in commas. You can consider it a non-defining relative clause that interrupts the main clause. They very often test relative clauses, and if you want more information about those, you should look for relative clauses Mr. Skype lessons on YouTube, and you'll find many lessons about relative clauses. Okay, so we need commas for the non-defining relative clause, and they've already got the second one, and they often give you a clue like that. I think they're giving you a clue that you need a comma before the who as well. Okay, let's carry on. So that's the 8th change. So let's go on to the next sentence. It is very striking that intentions about staying on are actually realised in such a high proportion of cases, he said. So we need the end of the speech marks. They've got the first ones. Again, that's a clue. You can't have speech marks without the corresponding end of speech. And clearly it's here because it says that he said. So you need speech marks, but you also need a comma inside the speech marks for direct speech. We always use a comma for direct speech if there's no other punctuation mark there in its place. And there isn't any other punctuation mark here, so we need a comma before the he said. So comma and speech marks, that will be 2 punctuation marks, so that brings us up to 10 changes. He went on to point out that the link between achievement at 11 and later life is well documented, but this study is the first to highlight the extent to which children's choices have already been made early in life. Now, you can probably already hear that that's the end of that thought, and so we're missing a full stop. So I'm going to put that in first, and that's our 11th change, because Professor Kroll identifies several reasons for this pattern of behaviour is already the next thought. So we'll leave that as the next sentence. Now, looking earlier, you might be tempted to put a comma before the but here. And it's because you've got a main clause before the but and what looks like a main clause after the but as well. And it is a main clause, really, but we don't want a comma here, and this is really quite important. It's quite a subtle point, because it really looks like main clause, comma, fanboys, but, and then main clause. But really, he went on to point out, X, that the link between achievement at 11 and later life is well documented, but Y, this study is the first to highlight the extent. So because these are 2 things that Professor Paul Kroll pointed out, because he pointed out X, I'm going to put an X there, but why? Because these are the two things that he pointed out. We mustn't have a comma here for the but, and that's really quite subtle. But the second part after the but is not really independent, and it's not independent, it can't stand on its own, simply because it's part of what he pointed out, so it needs the earlier part to make sense. He pointed out that the link between achievement at 11 and later life is well documented, but this study is the first to highlight the extent to which children's choices have already been made. So I hope that's clear. So I'm going to take those marks away because I think they mess it up a little bit, but there is no comma here before the but, even though you might think there needs to be one. Okay, there does need to be a punctuation mark here though, children's choices. We mean the choices of the children, and so there needs to be an apostrophe here before the S. And I always take these double words that need apostrophes and swap them round to the choices of the children to be sure where the apostrophe lies, because if it's choices of children, that means the apostrophe goes after the N, the choices of the children. But if we mean something like, I don't know, the choices of my friends, that would mean that the apostrophe goes after the S on friends, the choices of my friends. But the choices of the children, the apostrophe will go before the S. Okay, so that's another punctuation mark. Let's brings this up to 12 at least. Let's go on to the next sentence. Professor Kroll identifies several reasons for this pattern of behaviour. Children today develop earlier. Parental influence is strong, and friendship groups can be a powerful influence. So notice that I almost made a mistake there. I read it incorrectly because of the lack of punctuation. And so this shows how important punctuation is. The first thought identifies a list. Professor Kroll identifies several reasons, and he's going to give those in a second. He identifies several reasons for this pattern of behaviour. So, to introduce a list, we use a colon, which is just 2 dots. So we want 2 dots here for the colon. He identifies several reasons for this pattern of behaviour. So we need the colon, and then we need children today develop earlier. Okay, and then we need the semicolon. And then we've got the semicolon to divide up elements in the list, and we got a clue about that semicolon from this one here. Now, we really want to use semicolons here. They've told you anyway that you're using semicolons by putting one in already. But one good reason for using semicolons and not commas is that we have independent clauses here. Children develop earlier. Parental influence is strong. Friendship groups can be a powerful influence. And if we join together independent clauses with commas, we have a very famous mistake called the comma splice. So that's all the mistakes here, and I think if we count them very quickly, we'll see there are 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yep, we've got all 15 errors then, and that's finished the literacy paper. If you have any questions about any of these corrections, please put them under the video, but please do try to find my other lessons on colons, semicolons, hyphens, apostrophes, if you've got any other questions about these, because I might answer them on the video. Okay, thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all soon.